Ever feel like you're just kind of going through the motions, not really connecting with who you really are?
Mm.
Well, get ready because today we're diving deep into a framework that might just help you break free.
Ooh, exciting.
Natural life energies. We're going to use this lens to explore the fascinating journey of podcaster Tino,
Sounds intriguing.
focusing on his latest episode, Take 97, where he talks about AI, procrastination, and his big comeback after a long break from podcasting.
Okay.
So we've got Tino's own words from over the years.
Right.
Plus, we'll be tapping into Gary Null's book, Seven Energies.
It's like we're going to try to decode his personal operating system, figure out the why behind his choices and actions.
I love that. Okay, so let's start with the puzzle of Tino's podcasting journey. He's been at this for a while, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Years, I think.
His passion for broadcasting goes way back. In fact, in Take 96, he mentions being inspired by Gary Null's transition to online radio in the early 2000s. He even attempted his own health show on community radio, just like his broadcasting hero.
That's really cool. It's a great example of how powerful role models can be.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder, who are those early influences for you? Maybe who set you on your path?
Oh, that's a great question. I think for me, it was Expert briefly mentions a personal anecdote.
Wow.
But going back to Tino, he doesn't just stick with one format, does he?
No,
Always exploring new ways of connecting with his audience.
it's true.
Remember how he was uploading hour-long shows to SoundClick way back when MP3s were like just becoming a thing?
Yeah.
This was before podcasts were even a thing.
Crazy, right?
It's true.
He was ahead of the curve.
Yeah, he was.
And then he coined the term smartcasting when he started recording on his phone.
Yeah,
It's like he saw the potential of mobile recording before most people even had smartphones.
exactly. Always pushing boundaries, a real early adopter. And then there's commute casting, which is basically what he's doing now, recording on the train.
Yeah. It's amazing how he turned his daily commute into like a creative studio.
It really is.
It really makes you think about how we can use the in-between times in our lives more productively.
I know, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Though sometimes I have to admit I'm perfectly content just like zoning out on my commute.
Sure.
But speaking of challenges, Tino's been pretty open about his struggles with procrastination.
Oh, yeah.
In Take 97, he even mentions that he almost didn't release the previous episode because he felt self-conscious recording on the train.
It's something a lot of us can relate to, wouldn't you say?
Oh.
That fear of putting ourselves out there, especially creatively.
Totally.
Hmm.
But Tino's willingness to talk about it so openly is really refreshing.
Yeah.
Makes those struggles feel less isolating.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it shows a real commitment to authenticity, which
Yeah.
is something I admire about his work. Okay, so we've got this picture of Tino as a passionate broadcaster, always experimenting with new technologies, but also wrestling with this very human tendency to procrastinate.
It's a great summary.
Now, how does this all connect to the idea of natural life energies?
Right. That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Let's bring in Gary Null's 7 Energies, which proposes that everyone has a dominant natural life energy, or NLE,
Okay.
that shapes their personality and how they approach the world.
Hmm.
Imagine it as a kind of internal compass that guides our actions and reactions.
So it's not just about our learned behaviors, but
Yeah.
something deeper, more innate.
Oh, precisely.
Gotcha.
Null outlines 3 main types:
Good.
dynamic, adaptive, and creative.
Okay.
And then each type has assertive and aggressive subtypes.
Okay.
The key is that each energy has a high side and a low side. It's not about being good or bad,
Yeah.
but rather how our life experiences and conditioning impact how we express that energy.
So, for example, someone might have a naturally dynamic energy, but if they've been criticized for being too assertive in the past, they might end up suppressing that part of themselves.
That's a great example.
Okay.
And that suppression can manifest in different ways, maybe as procrastination, self-doubt, or even physical ailments.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got this framework of natural life energies, each with its own strengths and potential challenges. But how do we apply this to Tino? How do we determine his dominant energy?
Well, we need to play detective a bit. We have the clues from Tino's own words and actions, his passions, his challenges, his reflections on his own life.
Yeah.
And then we have the descriptions of each energy type from Gary Null's book.
Right.
It's like fitting together pieces of a puzzle.
Right. I'm game. Where do we start?
Let's look at some of the traits we've already observed in Tino. He's clearly passionate about expressing himself, he's drawn to new technologies and ideas, and he's not afraid to go against the grain. Does that ring a bell with any of the natural energy types we've discussed?
It definitely sounds like he might have a dynamic energy.
Yeah.
But which subtype? Assertive or aggressive?
That's the million-dollar question. And to answer that, we need to delve a little deeper into Tino's story, his motivations, and how he expresses himself. Are you ready to dive into part 2 of this investigation?
Absolutely. I can't wait to see where this leads. Okay, so we're back. We're trying to figure out if Tino is a dynamic assertive or dynamic aggressive. Yeah.
Right. Based on what we know about natural life energies and his podcasts.
Yeah. And remember, it's not about, putting him in a box.
No, not at all.
It's about using these concepts as a lens to understand him better.
The deeper patterns in his behavior, exactly.
Okay, so where do we begin with this?
Well, let's go back to his journey for a second.
Okay.
He starts off with this big vision of being a traditional broadcaster. He even tries that community radio show.
Right.
Then the internet comes along, and he doesn't even hesitate. Jumps right in.
Yeah.
First, it's MP3s on SoundClick, then YouTube, and then finally, podcasting.
And each time, it seems like he's drawn to the cutting edge, that new frontier of how to connect with an audience.
Absolutely.
It seems to suggest like a certain comfort with change and innovation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's a hallmark of the dynamic energy, both the assertive and aggressive subtypes. They aren't content with the status quo. Always got to be pushing boundaries, exploring new possibilities.
Okay, so that's one point for dynamic. But how do we tell the difference between assertive and aggressive?
Right.
Gary Null describes dynamic assertives as being passionate about self-expression, independent thinkers, often drawn to diverse experiences. But dynamic aggressives, they're more forceful, competitive. They could even be workaholics sometimes.
Excellent point. And this is where we got to look at the nuances of how Tino expresses himself.
Right.
So he's definitely passionate about sharing his ideas.
Yeah.
But does he come across as forceful or domineering? Or is it more like genuine enthusiasm and a desire to connect?
When I think back to his episodes, even the ones where he's tackling those controversial topics, he never seems to be pushing his views on anyone. It's more like, here's what I'm thinking about. Let's explore this together.
I agree. There's a sense of invitation in his tone, a willingness to have a real dialogue, not just dictate.
Right.
Remember his reflection in Take 97 about trying to cater to a specific audience in the past?
Yeah.
That kind of suggests a sensitivity to others, a desire to connect that wouldn't really line up with the dynamic, aggressive profile.
That's a good point. It shows that even someone who's naturally assertive and driven can also have that deep need for belonging.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to remember that these energy types aren't like rigid categories.
Right.
We all have a mix of different energies within us.
So it's more about like understanding which energy is dominant and how that shapes our overall approach to life.
Exactly. And in Tino's case, the evidence seems to point to dynamic assertive as his main energy.
Okay, so let's say we're on the right track with that. What does that tell us about his perspective on AI, which he really dives into in Take 97?
Well, if you think about that dynamic assertive tendency toward independent thinking and challenging conventional wisdom, it makes total sense that Tino wouldn't just accept like the mainstream narrative around AI.
You mean that idea that AI is either a threat to humanity or a tool to be exploited?
Exactly. Tino seems to be looking beyond those, those binary perspectives. Yeah. He's interested in the possibility of AI evolving its own consciousness, something totally distinct from human intelligence.
It's a pretty mind-blowing concept when you really think about it. It's not something you usually hear in those mainstream discussions.
Yeah.
About AI.
Right, and that's what makes his perspective so fascinating. He's not just repeating talking points, He's grappling with like the deeper philosophical implications of this tech.
Yeah.
And this actually lines up with another key dynamic assertive trait, their love of exploring big ideas and challenging assumptions.
It's like he's inviting us to think bigger.
Yes.
Beyond our current understanding and consider what might be possible if we let AI develop on its own.
Precisely. And that open-mindedness, that willingness to embrace the unknown, that's a hallmark of the dynamic assertive operating on the high side of their energy. They aren't afraid of change. They often actually thrive on it.
This is really making me think about my own relationship with AI.
Yeah.
I tend to get caught up in the fears, about job displacement and all the dangers. But Tino's perspective is offering like a whole new way of looking at it.
That's the power of these deep dives. They can challenge our assumptions and open us up to new possibilities. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
We still need to explore those potential downsides.
Yeah, because even those positive personality traits, they have their shadow sides.
Exactly. And in Tino's case, understanding those potential pitfalls might actually help us understand his break from podcasting. His reflections on trying to please his audience, even his struggles with procrastination.
All right, so we've been exploring Tino's podcasting journey through this lens of natural life energies.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of zeroing in on dynamic assertive as his likely dominant type.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to see how those traits, his passion for self-expression, his comfort with change, his drive to explore, all kind of weave together to create this unique tapestry of his podcast.
Right, but as with any personality type, there are potential downsides.
Yeah.
Right? Even those dynamic assertive qualities can have a shadow side.
Oh, absolutely. And in Tino's case, understanding those potential pitfalls might shed some light on some of the challenges he's faced, like his long break from podcasting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those downsides we should be thinking about?
Well, one of the biggest challenges for dynamic assertives is a tendency towards overwork.
Okay.
They're so passionate and driven, they can easily burn themselves out, especially if they're not careful about setting boundaries.
That makes a lot of sense. Tino mentioned in a previous episode that he's struggled with finding balance.
Yeah.
And that it eventually led to him needing to take a break from podcasting altogether.
Exactly. And it's not just about working too hard.
Right.
Dynamic assertives, they often have a lot of different interests, and they can get bored really easily if they're not constantly stimulated.
Oh, so it's like they need to have multiple projects going at once.
Yeah.
Or they'll get restless.
That's a great way to put it. And this can sometimes make it difficult for them to stick with things long term, even things they're really passionate about.
That really resonates with me. I'm always starting new projects, but I don't always finish them. It's something I'm working on. But how does this relate to Tino?
Well, think about his podcasting journey for a minute.
Okay.
He's experimented with so many different formats over the years. SoundClick, YouTube, even that community radio show.
Right.
It's like he's constantly searching for the next exciting challenge.
Which is awesome. But it can also be exhausting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're not, paying attention to your energy levels and taking time to recharge.
Exactly. And this tendency to jump from one thing to the next can also impact relationships.
Really?
Dynamic assertives often really value their independence, and they can sometimes struggle with intimacy.
Huh. That's interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily connected that to being a dynamic assertive, but now that you mention it, it makes sense.
Think about it this way. If you're always focused on the next big thing, it can be hard to be fully present in a relationship, And dynamic assertives, with their strong sense of self, they might find it tough to compromise or let go of control.
Which might explain why Tino mentioned in Take 97 that he's made mistakes by trying to cater to a specific audience with his podcast. It's like he's trying to, control the outcome instead of just being himself.
Precisely. And that can backfire because ultimately authenticity is what attracts people. Trying to be someone you're not is exhausting. And it's not sustainable.
So it seems like self-awareness is really key for dynamic assertives.
Yeah, absolutely.
They need to understand their strengths,
yeah,
but also those potential pitfalls so they can, navigate them.
More skillfully. Yeah, exactly. And that's where tools like natural life energies can be so helpful. They give us a framework for understanding ourselves better, recognizing those patterns that might be holding us back, and making more conscious choices.
So in Tino's case, maybe understanding he's a dynamic assertive could help him find that balance between pursuing his passions and taking care of himself, physically, emotionally.
Absolutely. It's not about changing who he is at all, but rather about harnessing those powerful energies in a way that supports his overall well-being and allows him to create the life he wants.
It's like he's got this amazing engine, but he needs to learn to drive it without running out of gas or crashing into things.
That's a fantastic analogy, and it's a reminder that even the most dynamic and assertive among us, we need to prioritize self-care. Set healthy boundaries, nurture those relationships that bring us joy.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I understand Tino's journey on a whole new level, and I've even learned a lot about myself along the way.
That's what it's all about, exploring these ideas, challenging our assumptions, and ultimately, becoming more self-aware and empowered.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to do some more exploring on my own.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll even check out Gary Null's book
Yeah.
and see if I can figure out my own dominant energy type.
That's a great idea. And who knows, maybe we'll have you on the show someday to share your insights.
Oh, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But seriously, thanks for this deep dive. It's been a real pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. And to you, our listener, thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope you've gained some valuable insights that you can, apply to your own life.
Remember, understanding your natural life energy is just the beginning. The real adventure is harnessing that knowledge to create a life that's truly authentic and fulfilling.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep diving deep.